All right, so one more screencast tonight to help you with your drafting of your section 2, and that has to do with citing your sources within the research paper. Again, this is something that I know you've learned before, but it's something that is always worth kind of going over. So we'll try to keep this short and sweet and let you guys get started with your actual writing. So I'm going to go back over here to Chrome, and I'm going to share this doc. This is on your lesson plan as well, so you can pull it up for reference later. So remember, the goal of in-text citations is to correspond exactly with entries on your works cited page. This is a simple concept, right? We see a citation in the paper, we say, oh, okay, that's by King, and then we can go to the works cited page and say, oh, okay, here's the source by King. This is where that information comes from. It's a relatively simple concept, but real-world writing is never simple. And so even though it should be really straightforward, we run into some wonky situations. MLA says that you don't need a parenthetical citation if you've stated the author's name in the sentence. I ask you to do actually the opposite. You should use a parenthetical citation every time you use a quote or a paraphrase specific points in your sources, even if you've named them in the sentence. And the reason I do that is because, again, we're not in publication, which is what MLA is made for. We're in learning. And part of what I'm evaluating is, can you use parenthetical citations? Well, if you don't use them, I can't see them. And so I'm asking you to use a parenthetical citation every time you use information from a source. It's also kind of a good habit because it means you don't run the risk of missing one. You know, you just kind of lose track of what you're doing. Every time you bring something from a source, use that parenthetical citation and you're covering your butt. All right, so this line right here, parenthetical citations always come at the end of the sentence and always have a period after them. That should be bolded, highlighted, like lights flashing around it. Even if the quote is in the middle of the sentence, that citation comes at the end, always. Now, how do we craft those citations? Well, the basic one is an author and page number, but of course, it's rarely that easy. So if your source is a book, which you all have a book source, that's gonna be pretty easy. You have a specific page number from which that information comes, so it's really easy to cite it. If your source is electronic, if it's a PDF and the PDF has you can see what information is on what page, you can use them. But most of your electronic sources are going to be websites or database sources that you don't have page numbers. Like, you may know that this article was originally on pages 385 to 392, but you don't know what was on what page because it's literally just sort of in a text box on the database. So you've got to sort of first figure out, okay, do I have page numbers or not? That's step one. So there's a couple of different scenarios down here for you. So if you've got a basic one author source with a page number available, this is going to be basically your books. Your citation is literally parenthesis, last name, the number, no P or PG or anything like that, closing parenthesis, and period. That's it. If you have a basic one author source with no page numbers available, like a website, it'll look like this, which is basically identical, except you don't have that number there. Notice that the period comes outside there, and this would come after the quote. Now, what you've got here is basically the exact same thing, except it tells you what to do if you have a source with 2 authors or 3 authors or 4+ authors. I know a lot of you are in those boats, so please make sure when you go to cite them, you come back to this and reference it, because it'll tell you exactly how to make that parenthetical citation. And they all have one with page numbers, without page numbers. This is probably the more important one that a lot of you will be in this situation. If you have a source with no author, and there are some of you who have this, what goes in the citation is the first important word of the title. Basically, the first thing in the citation on the works cited. If it's in quotes on there, it should be in quotes in your parentheses too. So let's just say I had an article called Children in Crisis, and it had no author. So it was filed under C on my works cited page. I need to use the first word of the title. However, because it's an article title and it's in quotation marks on the works cited, it has to go in quotation marks in the parenthetical citation as well, right? In a rare circumstance that you've got this situation, but you have more than one source that starts with the same first word, come see me. Keep in mind that important first words aren't things like the or an. We're looking for content words, which is where you would have it alphabetized anyhow. I don't think any of you are in this boat. If you have multiple sources by the same author, I don't think that's a scenario that you'll be running into here. It's a bigger deal when we're dealing with literary criticism. But if so, you've got this here. If you have two different authors with the same last name, again, I don't think that's something we're gonna have to worry about. If you have a source with a corporate author, there may be one or two of you who have this, and this one would be a corporate author. If you have a page number, this would be a corporate author without a page number. If you have a situation that doesn't fit any of these templates, you should definitely talk to me and I'll help you out. All right. But the most important ones I think you should be concerned with are number 6, number 1, and number 2. Those are going to be your standards. If you've got sources with multiple authors, then you've got that information here when you need it. Right. There's one other thing I want to point out on this document, and it's the second page, and it is giant letters. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. It's something that's going to be on your checklist that you're going to look at right before you turn it in. In-text formatting of titles. It always follows the same format as if it were on a works cited page. And I don't know if you realize this, but anytime on a works cited page in MLA format, if you have an article title, or let's not even say article, let's say anything short, something like a song title or an episode title, a page title, an article, that kind of thing, it's always in quotation marks. All right. If you have something bigger like a book title or a database title or an album title or a series title, that kind of thing, those are always going to be italicized. That's why the title of the original periodical and the title of the database are italicized, and why the title of the article is in quotes. MLA makes a distinction between things that are containers get italicized, whereas things that are contained go into quotes. That same rule follows when you're using titles in your paper. So if you're doing a top on and you're using the title of the article, it's got to go in quotation marks. If you're using the title of your book, it's got to get italicized. And so this is a very large letter. Anytime you write an article, poem, story, page, song title, it should go in quotes. Anytime you write a book, movie, album, website, journal, magazine, newspaper, database, it should be italicized. That's it's a pet peeve of mine because it's a signifier, right? So I should know when I see something in italics, and I can immediately tell, oh, okay, this is a book or a journal. If I see something in quotation marks, I know that I, even instantly, without even thinking about it, that this is an article. And that immediately tells me something about how I can go find it or what type of sources came from. So I wanted to make sure to point that out to you as well. All right. But I also want to go back over here before we leave tonight and point out some things about the parenthetical citations of the quotes in my sample paper. So right here, I've got something really simple, and I pointed this out before, but I said, he says, and I've got the quote, and then at the end, I've got my basic book citation, Pertman 167. Notice that there's no punctuation here. There's the parentheses and a period out here. I've got his name and the number. That's it. All right. Now, just a second later, like 2 sentences later, I use another quote by the same guy. All right. In that case, I only need to use the page number because I'm still talking about the same guy. I could use a page number if I really wanted to, if I wanted to be careful, but that's okay. As soon as I go to change sources, I've got to use the name again. If I use something by Pertman and then something by someone else and then come back to Pertman, I got to use that last name again. But in this case, that's why I have Pertman here, but I don't have his last name here because I'm still in the same source. I will point out in this one something that I have here. This might be a thing you run into with your quotes. If the person who said the quote is not the same as the person who wrote the article, you have to cite the person who wrote the article. But in your text, you have to explain who this was said by. So in this case, they're paraphrasing the couples, okay? But I can't attribute it to the couples. This is attributed to Daniluk and Hartig Mitchell, 393. Now this was a web source, but this was a PDF. So I know that this was in fact on page 393. So that's there. This is another good example of what I had done over on the other page, was that if you have a source with two authors, it should be last name 1 and last name 2. That's what I did here. Daniluk and Hartig Mitchell, 393. Same thing, period on the outside, no punctuation here. Simple. This is another quote, kind of the similar, where it was the couples who were actually saying this, but I still have to cite Hartig Mitchell and Daniluk. And just like I did with Pertman up above, because I was just talking about them here and I haven't switched sources, I can just use the page number. All right. Just a couple of more things I wanted to point out. I have another, this is a paraphrase. There's no quote whatsoever, but I am noting something very specific that they said. I'm just paraphrasing it. I still need to cite that. Notice I didn't include their names because I'm still talking about the same source. I could use their names if I wanted to, but I definitely still cited it. And this is another example where my text is pointing out who said this, but I'm still attributing it to the source that matches up on my works cited page. Right. I have two more things I want to kind of show you, and I kind of talked about this a little bit in the last video as well. But here's two different ways. I'm working with one of the Pertman sentences, and you're going to see that they're very similar here. So one way I could do this is he says, quote, "It's hard for me to hear another earnest social worker chant the reformist mantra that adoption should be all about finding parents for children, not children for parents." Right? This is a quote within a quote, right? He, Pertman, is actually the one who is this me. He's saying it's hard for me to hear a social worker chant this mantra. When I have that quote within a quote, I've got to set that off, right? So in the book, this wasn't in quotation marks. This was. But now I'm quoting partially what Pertman said and partially what, in this case, it wasn't a source, but he's sort of quoting a common phrase. I have to indicate that, and I do that using single quotation marks, just like this. However, if I had done it differently, I wouldn't punctuate it like that. So if I had worded it like this, he says that social workers were frustrating as they kept saying things like, adoption should be all about finding parents for children, not children for parents. Notice how here I paraphrased him. Here I quoted him. And so that's why this one doesn't have that sort of quote within quote problem. It's literally just the quote, right? I know this is a lot to take in. I know it's complicated, and I encourage you to reach out and ask questions of me as you're going through this. I'm here. You guys are going to be working on your research paper over the course of the next 2 weeks, and I'm not going to be bugging you or giving you much new, because I know you've got other things going on. But I'm here, and so definitely as we work through this process, I want you to reach out to me and ask questions about how to cite things, how to integrate things, all of that. Thank you guys for watching.